So in our community, we have about 7 speakers, fluent speakers left. A lot of the people have died off. So we've had language classes over the years. And so I moved back to my home reservation in 1992. So I've been back 22 years. And prior to that, I lived on another reservation called the White Earth Reservation. And there I worked on land claims issues and other types of issues. And I did community organizing. So I was a community organizer for 8 years. And I moved back to my home reservation. And so a lot of our fluent speakers have died out. Now today, originally there was a BIA day school in Grand Portage. So some of the kids at an early age didn't have to go off to boarding schools. They didn't go off to boarding schools till they were older, like equivalent to being in 7th grade and high school. People were taken to boarding schools. Other than that, they stayed in Grand Portage through elementary school. Then we became part of the school district in the late 1950s. We became part of the Cook County School District, which is the town of Grand Marais is 35 miles south of us, south of the reservation. And so our kids now were going to the public school, and there was no language courses until really the 1970s, 1980s, when there was federal money allocated under the Indian Self-Determination Act and the 1973 Indian Education General Assistance Act to create these types of programs, Indian history, to teach language in the school systems, like in Minneapolis here. That was in 1973, 1974. And so we're still, our kids learn the language, are learning it, but they're not really becoming fluent yet. And finally, 7 years ago in our community, because the school district kept cutting back classes because of the financial situation. It's a very rural school district, so they don't get that much money, and the graduation classes have been dropping.
Okay.
So the area is not really a place where you could go off to college, come back, and get a good job.
Okay.
Grand Marais is more of a tourist town, and there isn't very much business or professional jobs.
Okay.
And so we send our kids. So we said we got to keep our kids in the community for at least till 6th grade.
Okay.
And then they can go down. We're a small community. There's only 500 people live on the community, and about 400 native and 100 non-native who work in our casino and our programs and in our enterprises. And so our kids have to go to school. So we don't have a big enough population of kids to have our own high school or junior high school. We wouldn't get enough money allocated to have an effective educational program unless the tribe put in a lot of money into it. So we send our kids from 7th grade to 12th grade down to Grand Marais, 35 miles south, to go to middle school and high school.
And that's an everyday trip, or just once a week?
Every day.
Okay, wow.
And so we started a charter school, and our charter school is called Oshke Ogimag, and Oshke is the word for new or young. Oshke is young, Oshke is new. Ogima is a leader.
Okay.
Ogima Ug is just pluralizing leader, it means leaders. So what it means is we got a school for new leaders.
Okay.
We're trying to create new leaders for the future. So the goal is to not only teach them English, courses in English, but then another half of the day we immerse the kids in the language and culture.
Okay, got it.
So that we're teaching the language. And the goal is from our children go in kindergarten, and by the time they get to 6th grade, they're bilingual.
Oh, okay.
They're fluent in English, and they're fluent in our language called Anishinaabe Muwin. And that just means that this is the way we speak.
Okay.
We speak as human beings with this language. And so we're trying to create a new leadership that instill a worldview, our worldview, which is different from the worldview of the American worldview.
Got it.
Different worldview, relationship to the earth, spiritual relationship to spirits of creation. It's a whole different ceremonies, and so we're trying to develop children who, by the time they're get out of 6th grade, they know who they are. And even a lot of the non-tribal children, or children that would be classified as white children, who go to our school too, are learning our language, learning our history,
Nice.
learning our culture. And so these people then have a more correct understanding of our culture, our language, and who we are as a people. And so we're producing other non-tribal kids who will not buy into the stereotypes, like redskin, that still exist, that it's like we're not in commercials.
Yeah, I got it.
Your people are in commercials. Asian people are in commercials. Hispanic and Latino people are in commercials. Where do you see Indian people in commercials? Even with all the actresses and actors we got now.
Got it.
We were still invisible. They've invisibilized us, not only in the history books, but we're still invisibilized in American society. Why? Haven't figured that one out, because we're not supposed to be here. They almost literally wiped us out. From when we figure, when Indian people became ethnologists, they started looking more in and found out that there are probably about 17 to 20 million living on this continent. On the North American continent. By 1900, they could only count 250,000.
So
you do the math. How many? They almost. You're looking at, they wiped out 15, 16 million people in about a 400 and some year period of time.
Got it.
So they almost wiped us out. Talk about a holocaust. We call that the American Holocaust. They've had other holocausts. They had Nazi Germany had a Holocaust. The Soviet Union with Stalin almost killed off 6 million Ukrainians. You had a whole bunch of these holocausts.
But we never hear about this one.
And the Middle Passage of that Holocaust that happened to the people that were stealing from West Africa and putting them on slave ships and putting them on islands to work, and then eventually over here in 1619 brought them to the first 20 to Jamestown, and then and so our language. So what we do is we're trying to make sure we have classes for adults, but not many show up in our community, but this is happening all over Indian country, and this isn't just happening it's happening within all the tribes, really trying to create programs that produce fluent speakers of our language, because we tell our children, if our language dies out, then we will die out as a people.
That's right.
We will cease to exist. Because if we don't speak our original language, then we'll forget our history. We'll forget where we came from. All of a sudden, our creation stories will be forgotten. We can tell them in English, but it doesn't mean the same.
And it doesn't translate.
It doesn't translate that worldview that has kept us alive till 2014. That's why we're still here, because of the strength of our worldview and our culture and our ceremonies, and that's what's going to keep us going into the future. Not getting PhDs, not getting 200,000 a year job, not having nice cars, nice houses, nice television. We're not going to survive because of those material things. We're going to survive because of our culture and our ability to exist with other things other than these material things. And so that's how important language is. We die as a people if our language dies. And so there's a very concerted effort, not only here in Minnesota, for Dakota and people they call Chippewa, Anishinaabe people, to continue to develop programs or ways to revitalize and produce fluent speakers. And there are a lot of fluent speakers being produced here just in Minnesota.
Got it. Yeah,
here at the university with I first came here in 1970 to take, because they created Indian Studies departments. I came here to learn a language again.
Okay.
My mother spoke it. My dad forgot it because he was raised in a mission school. By the time he 8th grade, he didn't speak his language no more. My mother retained it. She never forgot it. And so, but she wouldn't teach it to me because we lived in South Minneapolis.
Okay.
And she felt that if she taught me our language, that I would have a hard time succeeding in the public school system.
Okay.
So I didn't have to learn it until I went to college. I came here, and this is when I started learning my language.
Got it.
In the courses that the very first Ojibwe courses that they created, and then later on began to learn from elders and just continue to going to ceremonies and hearing it, and then being able to speak it.
Okay.
Now that I can speak it and understand it. And
so you're fluent in it?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
No,
and,
so to understand English now too.
Okay.
I'm very fluent in English.
I can tell. So you talked about sending your kids off to school to get PhDs and the whole American dream of just $200,000 jobs and stuff like that.
What I'm saying, we can't rely on that. It's, that's then you're being assimilated. Nothing wrong with that. If you want to go, if you're not living in our community and you're living in Minneapolis or someplace in the country, and you have to somehow make a living, you want to have a good place to live, you're going to have to get a good job, and therefore you're going to have to go to a university and get a good education. The problem is don't let that institution that is not operating and coming from your worldview, your cultural perspective, don't compromise who you are in that institution so that you come back into our community or you think you're smarter than the people that didn't graduate from high school. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But if you come back to help rebuild our communities, make them positive places to live based on the way they were 1,000 years ago. Everybody took care of themselves, and there's still remnants of that yet today. People taking care of themselves. That they haven't destroyed it, but it's bits and pieces now, and there's a conflict because a lot of our people have been assimilated. We're trying to teach our kids the language, and so one day our principal will get a call from a grandfather and say, "Why are you teaching my grandson that Indian language? That's not going to do him any good, you see. He's assimilated. I don't, that's not his fault."
In order to succeed, he must learn English to maturity.
Yes, without understanding that if your grandson becomes bilingual, that's going to get him, he's not going to be able to thinking in a dominant society's way of thinking, but he's also going to be thinking in who the kid is. That other worldview is not who that child was born to. He was not born to think in that way because there's a conflict in the thinking. But if he can think in both ways, then that means he's got. We know that children that learn more than one language, their brains are being developed better. So it's like, African American people who teach African languages to their children. And there's schools like that, or Asian people. There's Chinese schools that they're learning English and Chinese.
A lot of charter schools.
And charter schools, and same with the Latinos. Of course, they grew up learning they're bilingual. That's just the way, but of course they were never ostracized. It was never beaten out of them like it was for us, multi-generational ago. So language, where there's a large, and we're revitalizing it, and we're trying to ensure that our language doesn't die off, and our cultural ways don't die off. We have young drum groups, kids that sing at powwows, or they started when they were like 5-6 years old. Now they're teenagers, and they got their own drum, and they go around and do. So we're making sure our culture doesn't die out.
Got it.
And that.
Okay. The next couple of questions focus on right now, like your society, your culture, right now, as not from past. Okay. How many?
What do you mean?
Well,
when you say not from the past.
Well, you can look at it. I can ask you. about your population, and you can definitely tell me how your population has changed. But right now, I'm asking,
Changed in what way?
change as in the growth, is it increasing or decreasing?
The growth. You got to be more. These are
The
those
number, the number
those are
of
vague.
the number of Grand Portage residents.
Yeah.
How many would you peg it as?
W- w- I-
How many people live on a reservation that are Grand Portage?
Well, we got not only Grand Portage people, we got people from other tribes too live on our.
Yeah, but I'm saying just from that tribe only.
Just from Grand Portage.
Yes.
Okay, what's the question?
How many people? How many are we looking at? Are we saying
We're
just
looking
by,
at about in our last. There's 225 eligible voters, so about 350.
350?
Yeah.
Okay. And then would you say the majority would be women or male?
Women.
Women, okay. And then, okay, so that's just right now. And then something you mentioned earlier, I don't know if you still remember, you said something about suicide. Is that still on the
We still have no, but we don't have it.
Okay, but there
We
is
haven't
that
had any. There is very high.
in the Native American
Yes,
culture.
yes.
Okay. And then abuse of drugs and alcohol, is that
Yes.
still high in the Native American?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And then, okay, so touching on those two subjects, now let's just focus only on the Grand Portage tribe. Why do you think you guys have such low numbers compared to the average Native American?
We're a small community,
Okay.
and it's easier to watch our children.
Okay, got it.
It's easier to keep, even though as small as our community is, there are drugs in our community. There are adults. There are still young women that are still doing them, young boys. But there's real close supervision,
Okay, got it.
and that any kids that have a problem. So when you're in a small community and you're able to watch kids, how they interact with each other, how
Yeah.
if they act out,
Okay.
and it's easier to identify a problem, even though, like in other communities, we have parents that are in denial
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
because what they feel is if my child gets in trouble, then it's kind of like my fault.
Okay.
They're going to be looking at me too. So but then you got other parents that are willing to come forward when their child gets in a problem with drugs or drinking. There's others that won't deny it and are able to come in and get them help.
Okay.
So we have the immediate help for our children who get caught up in these things.
Where do
And
they get the drugs and alcohol?
they're
from?
brought in.
They're brought into
The
the
drugs are
reservation
brought in, yeah.
by people that come into the casino, or just like drug
Coming
dealers just coming in.
coming into the community. They might be related to people in the community,
Okay.
or they might know people in the community.
So what is the tribal council doing about that, stopping it? Is it more, are you guys putting,
Well, one thing we did, we have what we call an exclusion ordinance. There were some bad incidences that happened with drinking and partying, and innocent people were hurt. And so the community came, about 100 came to a meeting with the tribal council and said, you got to do something about this. This is not Grand Portage where this kind of violence is tolerated. And so for those people who act out and act out in a very violent way, we want them kicked out.
okay,
And so, sometimes they call it banishment. They call it, and that traditionally that also happened if you didn't, you were a detriment to the society, not an individual.
Okay.
But you were viewed as not a very good person to live within the community. And so we developed what was called an exclusion ordinance.
okay,
And so, and we haven't had and it's really, we don't do it as a tribal council. We only do it when the people come to us, a number of people, maybe with a petition, and say, we want this person excluded
okay, got it.
because of this and that. He's scaring elders, or she's scaring elders. We feel that they're a danger to our community. and we've only done it to maybe 5, 6 people.
Okay.
But it's so we've excluded them, and before we even exclude them, they get to come before us and defend themselves as to why the people want them removed, and